They didn't follow the man, they followed what he was worth. The first time Daniel Hayes noticed the car, it was idling across the street, engine low, headlights off, just a silhouette pressed into the gray of an early Chicago morning. Most people wouldn't have seen it. Most people didn't see him either. A homeless veteran, mid-40s, beard grown uneven, jacket too thin for the cold, sitting on a cracked concrete step beneath an overpass where the wind carried the stale scent of gasoline and winter rain. He had learned to become invisible. It was easier that way. Easier to survive when no one expected anything from you. But Rex noticed. The German shepherd's ears lifted before Daniel even turned his head. Not a bark. Not a growl. Just stillness. The kind that comes before a storm you can't yet feel. Easy, boy, Daniel murmured, his voice rough from disuse, breath curling into the air like smoke. Rex didn't move. His amber eyes stayed locked across the street, unblinking, as if reading something written in silence. The car didn't leave. Minutes passed. Then more. People walked by in heavy coats, boots crunching salt and slush, never once glancing toward the man or the dog sitting just 10 feet from their path. A siren wailed somewhere far off, swallowed by the city's constant hum. Daniel shifted, pulling his jacket tighter. The cold seeped through everything these days. Bones. Thoughts. Memory. He reached into his pocket and felt the familiar edges of a worn set of dog tags, metal cool against his fingertips. A habit he never broke. Some things you carry even when everything else is gone. Across the street, the car door opened. A man stepped out, clean lines, dark coat, movements precise. Not lost. Not wandering. Intentional. He didn't look at Daniel directly. Not at first. Instead, he scanned the space the way someone does when they already know what they're looking for. Rex stood slowly, his body aligning between Daniel and the street without being told. Protective. Quiet. Always quiet. Sir, the man called, voice controlled, practiced. Daniel didn't answer right away. He had learned that voices like that rarely brought anything good. The man took a few steps closer, shoes too polished for this part of the city, stopping just beyond reach, as if there were an invisible line he wouldn't cross. Daniel Hayes, he said, not a question. A statement. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Names had a way of finding you when you least wanted to be found. You've been difficult to locate, the man continued, pulling a thin envelope from inside his coat. Paper against fabric. Soft. Final. Rex's gaze flicked to it, then back to the man's face. Watching. Measuring. I'm here regarding a will. The word hung in the cold air, strange and out of place, like it didn't belong in a world of concrete and cardboard and nights without heat. Daniel let out a slow breath. You've got the wrong guy, he said quietly. The man shook his head once, almost respectfully. No, sir. I don't think I do. Behind him, the car engine came back to life. Another figure inside. Waiting. Daniel felt it then. Not fear. Not exactly. Something older. The kind that settles deep in your chest when the past starts walking toward you again. Rex stepped forward, just one pace, enough to close the distance between them, his presence solid, grounding. The man glanced down at the dog, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. He was listed as your next of kin, he said, extending the envelope slightly. And what follows is going to change everything. The wind picked up, sharp and sudden, carrying the scent of snow. Daniel didn't reach for the envelope. Not yet. Because somewhere behind the man's calm voice, behind the clean coat and the legal words, something else moved. Something quieter. Something wrong. And Rex? Rex had already seen it. Daniel does not take the envelope right away because something about paper offered too easily has always carried a cost, and he has paid enough of those in a lifetime that no longer keeps count, so instead he studies the man's hands, clean nails, steady grip, the kind of hands that have never had to choose between warmth and food on a night below 30 degrees, and Rex shifts again, closer now, the warmth of his body pressing lightly against Daniel's leg like a reminder that not everything in this moment is uncertain. You said a will, Daniel finally replies, his voice low but steady, and the man nods once, patient, as if rehearsed, as if he has said these same words before to people who did not believe him either. A private estate, recently processed, your name appears in the document as a beneficiary. The word sounds wrong out here under the overpass where the concrete sweats and the air tastes like rust. Beneficiary belongs to offices with glass walls and coffee that costs more than Daniel has seen in weeks, not here where a man counts quarters for a bus he might not take. You have about 5 minutes, Daniel says quietly, not inviting, not refusing, just setting a boundary that feels like something he still owns, and the man accepts it with a small incline of his head before placing the envelope gently on the ledge beside Daniel instead of forcing it into his hand, a gesture that almost feels like respect, almost. My name is Andrew Keller, he says, stepping back half a pace, giving space the way one does with animals that might bolt, and Rex's eyes follow every movement, measuring distance, intent, something deeper than sight. The estate belonged to a Mr. Howard Langford, Keller continues, and at the sound of the name something flickers across Daniel's face so fast it might have been missed by anyone else, but Rex sees it, he always does, his ears tilt slightly, a shift in attention that says memory has just entered the room. Daniel exhales slowly, the kind of breath that carries weight. I do not know anyone by that name, he says, but there is a hesitation now, a fraction of a second too long, and Keller notices, of course he notices. That is what men like him are trained to do. According to the documents, Mr. Langford made a late amendment to his will 6 months ago, Keller says, his voice calm, measured. He listed you specifically, Daniel Hayes, former United States Marine Corps, along with one additional note. Keller pauses, just enough to let the moment settle, and even the distant traffic seems to fade for a second. He wrote, and I quote, find the man who carried the dog through the smoke, he will understand. The words land softly but they carry something heavy, something that does not belong to this cold morning, and Daniel's fingers tighten slightly against the edge of the concrete, the metal dog tags in his pocket pressing into his palm, cold and real, grounding him as something older begins to stir beneath the surface, a memory not yet clear but close enough to feel. Rex lets out a quiet breath, not a sound of alarm but recognition, like a door opening somewhere only he can see. Across the street the second figure inside the car shifts, a silhouette moving behind tinted glass, waiting, watching, and Daniel finally looks down at the envelope resting beside him, thin, ordinary, but suddenly heavier than anything he has carried in years. If this is some kind of mistake, Daniel begins, but Keller gently shakes his head, not dismissive, just certain, it is not a mistake, Mr. Hayes, and there are others who are very interested in making sure you never open that. Keller glances briefly toward the car before returning his gaze, which is why I suggest you do not stay here much longer. The wind cuts sharper now, carrying the promise of snow, and Rex steps forward again, his body angled slightly toward the street, eyes fixed, unwavering, because whatever this is, whatever has begun, it is no longer about a man sitting under an overpass. It is about something that has followed him here, something that knows his name, and something that Rex has already decided is not to be trusted. Daniel does not remember standing up, only that suddenly he is no longer sitting on the cold concrete and the world feels slightly tilted, as if something unseen has shifted beneath his feet, the envelope still resting where Keller placed it, untouched but impossible to ignore, and Rex moves with him, silent, deliberate, his shoulder brushing Daniel's leg as if guiding rather than following. Through the smoke, Daniel repeats under his breath, the words tasting unfamiliar and yet not, like something half buried in a place he has avoided for years. Keller watches carefully, not pushing, not interrupting, just waiting the way a man waits when he knows the answer is already inside someone else. Across the street the car engine hums low, steady, patient, and Daniel can feel it now, not just the presence but the attention, like eyes that do not blink. You said 6 months ago, Daniel says, his gaze drifting somewhere beyond the overpass, beyond the city, somewhere farther back. That is when he changed it. Keller confirms, shortly after he was discharged from a private care facility in Virginia. The detail lands quietly but it carries weight, and Daniel's brow tightens slightly. Virginia, there had been a transfer once, a temporary assignment, something involving logistics, or maybe evacuation. The memory does not come clean, It never does. It arrives in fragments, sounds before faces, feelings before facts, and then Rex steps forward again, this time not toward the street but away from it, a single step that pulls Daniel's attention back, the dog's nose lifting slightly, catching something in the air that no one else seems to notice. And Daniel follows that movement instinctively, because he has learned that when Rex moves like that it is not random, it is direction. "We need to go," Daniel says suddenly, the word surprising even him. Keller studies him for a moment, then nods once. "Quick, efficient, there is a diner 2 blocks east," Keller says. "Open, warm, less exposed." He does not say safer, but the meaning is there, and Daniel finally reaches down and picks up the envelope, the paper colder than he expects. Lighter than it should be for something that feels this heavy. He slips it into his jacket without opening it. "Not yet, not here," and Rex turns without being told, already moving, leading them away from the overpass, away from the car, his pace steady but purposeful, as if he knows exactly where to go. Keller falls in step just behind them, not too close, not too far, maintaining that careful distance, and as they move the city begins to wake around them, traffic building, footsteps multiplying, the ordinary rhythm of morning swallowing what had just happened. As if it never existed, but Daniel feels it, under his skin, in the tightness of his chest. Something has started and it is not going to stop, not now, not after all this time. They pass storefronts with dark windows, a bus hisses to a stop at the corner, a man in a suit rushes by without looking, and for a moment Daniel catches his reflection in a glass door, a brief, distorted image of a man he barely recognizes, older, worn, but still standing, still moving. And beside him Rex, strong, alert, unwavering, the only constant left. "What exactly does the will say?" Daniel asks as they walk, his voice quieter now, more controlled. Keller glances ahead before answering. "It transfers a substantial estate into a trust under your name," he says, "but that is not the part that concerns them." He nods slightly back toward where the car had been. "It is the condition attached to it." Daniel's steps slow just slightly. "Condition," he repeats, and Keller's expression tightens just enough to show that this is where things stop being simple. "Yes," Keller says, "the estate is only released once a specific location is identified and verified." Daniel feels something shift again, deeper this time. Like a lock turning somewhere in his mind. "What location?" he asks, and Keller shakes his head once. "That is the part only you are meant to know." The words hang between them, heavy, deliberate, and Rex stops walking, just for a second, his head turning slightly toward a narrow alley ahead, his body going still in that same quiet way, the way that means something is there, something important, and Daniel does not ask why, he never does. He simply follows, because whatever truth this is, whatever it has been waiting for, it is not in the envelope, it is somewhere out there, and Rex has already found the first step toward it. Rex does not bark, he never does when it matters, he simply turns his head and steps into the narrow alley as if following a line only he can see, and Daniel hesitates for half a second, just long enough for doubt to flicker, because alleys like this are not where good things happen, not in cities like this, not at this hour when the light has not fully claimed the day. But then Rex looks back, just once, and that is enough, it has always been enough. So Daniel follows, his boots echoing softly against damp concrete as the sounds of traffic fade behind them, replaced by the hollow drip of water from rusted pipes and the distant hum of something electrical. Keller pauses at the entrance for a moment, scanning, calculating, then steps in as well, careful, controlled, his presence still measured like he is walking through someone else's story rather than his own. The alley stretches maybe 50 yards, narrow, lined with brick walls stained by time and weather. Graffiti layered over graffiti like voices that were never heard, and halfway down Rex slows, his nose lowering, tracing something invisible along the ground, his body language shifting from alert to certain, and Daniel feels it again, that pull, not fear, not quite memory, something in between, like standing at the edge of a thought that refuses to fully form. "What is he tracking?" Keller asks quietly, not demanding, just curious, and Daniel shakes his head slightly, eyes on Rex. "Not what," he says under his breath. "Where?" Rex stops near a metal door set into the side of the building, old, painted a dull green that has chipped away in patches to reveal rust beneath. It looks like nothing, just another forgotten entrance in a city full of them, but Rex stands in front of it, still, focused, his tail low but steady, and Daniel steps closer, his hand reaching out almost without thinking, fingers brushing the cold surface of the door, and the moment he touches it something shifts inside him, not a full memory, not yet, just a sensation, The smell of smoke, faint but unmistakable, the kind that clings to fabric long after the fire is gone. His breath catches slightly, and he pulls his hand back, looking at it as if expecting to see something there. You recognize it, Keller says, more observation than question, and Daniel does not answer right away because recognition is a dangerous thing when you have spent years trying not to remember. Rex lets out a soft exhale, pressing his nose briefly against the bottom edge of the door, then looking back at Daniel. Again, patient, waiting, and Daniel closes his eyes for just a second, the sounds around him dimming, the drip of water fading, replaced by something else, something older, the distant crackle of heat, the weight of gear on his shoulders, a voice shouting through static, not words, just urgency, and then it is gone, slipping away before he can grab hold of it. He opens his eyes again, the alley returning, the cold air sharp in his lungs. I have been here before, he says quietly, the words surprising him even as he speaks them. Keller's expression tightens slightly, interest sharpening. When, he asks, and Daniel shakes his head. Frustration flickering across his face. I do not know, he admits, and that is the truth, because whatever happened here has been buried deep, deeper than conscious memory, but not deeper than instinct, not deeper than the part of him that Rex seems to understand without needing to ask. Daniel reaches for the handle of the door, hesitates, then pulls. It does not open. Locked, of course it is locked. Things like this are never easy, never simple. Keller steps forward slightly, glancing at the frame, the hinges, the lock, already assessing, but Rex does not move away. He stays right there, planted, certain, as if this door is not the end but the beginning, and Daniel feels it too now, clearer than before. This is not just a place, it is a piece of something larger, something that has been waiting, and somewhere behind them, faint but unmistakable, the low hum of an engine returns, not close, not yet, but coming back, because whatever they are about to uncover, they are not the only ones looking for it. And this time, Daniel does not need Rex to tell him that they are running out of time. Daniel steps back from the door, not out of fear but to think, because doors like this are not opened by force, not anymore, not by him. Those days are behind him, or at least he tells himself they are, and Keller moves closer, studying the lock with a quiet focus, fingers hovering but not touching, as if even contact might disturb something fragile in the moment. It is an older mechanism, Keller says softly, almost to himself. Industrial grade, probably installed 10, maybe 15 years ago. Daniel barely hears him because his attention is on Rex, who has lowered himself slightly, not lying down but grounding, his body aligned with the door, his ears shifting with small movements, listening not just to the alley but beyond it. And then Rex lifts his head and looks to the right, not toward the street but toward a narrow gap between buildings where light barely reaches, and Daniel follows that gaze, his instincts catching up to what the dog already knows. We are not alone, Daniel says quietly, and Keller straightens, turning his head just enough to listen, and there it is again. The faint rhythm of an engine, slower now, closer, not rushing, just circling, patient, and Daniel exhales slowly, the kind of breath that steadies a man when the world starts closing in. How long before they come in here? Keller asks, his voice still calm but edged now with urgency, and Daniel shakes his head slightly. They do not need to come in, he says, they just need to wait, because people like that do not chase, they close, they surround, they let pressure do the work. Rex shifts again, stepping away from the door now, not abandoning it but repositioning, his nose lifting, catching something carried on the air, and then he moves toward the side wall, pacing 3 steps before stopping again, looking back at Daniel with that same steady certainty, and Daniel understands, not fully, not consciously, but enough. He moves to where Rex stands and runs his hand along the brick, rough, cold, uneven, until his fingers catch on something different, a seam, barely visible, a line where the mortar has been disturbed, and he presses lightly. Nothing happens. He presses harder, still nothing, but Rex does not move. He stays right there, watching, waiting, and Daniel closes his eyes again for just a second, letting the noise of the present fade, reaching for that feeling from before, the smoke, the heat, the urgency, and this time it comes a little clearer, a wall, not this wall but one like it, a hidden entry, a way through when the obvious path was blocked. His hand shifts slightly, pressing higher this time, and something clicks, soft but unmistakable, and a narrow section of the wall gives just enough to reveal a recessed handle, metal worn smooth by time. Keller exhales quietly, a brief flicker of surprise breaking through his composed exterior. Well, he murmurs, That was not in the documents. Daniel does not respond. He simply pulls, and the panel opens inward with a low creak, revealing a dark passage beyond. Narrow, unlit, the air inside carrying that same faint scent of smoke and something else, older, like dust that has not been disturbed in years. Rex steps forward immediately, no hesitation, no fear, just purpose. And Daniel follows without question, because whatever is on the other side of this is not new to him, not really. It is something he has already lived, even if he does not yet remember how. Keller hesitates only a fraction of a second before stepping in after them, pulling the panel closed behind him, and the alley disappears. The sounds of the city cut off like a door shutting on another life, leaving only the quiet darkness ahead, and Daniel feels it settle around him, not threatening, not yet, just waiting. Like the rest of this story, like the truth that has been circling him since the moment that car first appeared, and somewhere behind them, beyond the wall, the engine finally goes silent, because now they know exactly where he went. The darkness does not feel empty, it feels remembered, like a place that has been waiting with quiet patience for someone to return, and Daniel slows his steps without realizing it, his eyes adjusting as faint light leaks in from somewhere ahead, not enough to reveal everything but enough to outline shapes, a narrow corridor, concrete walls, pipes running along the ceiling with the occasional drip echoing softly like a clock that does not measure time but presence, and Rex moves ahead with steady confidence, not rushing, not cautious, just certain, his paws making almost no sound against the floor, his body language calm in a way that settles something inside Daniel's chest. How far does this go? Keller asks from behind, his voice lower now, instinctively respectful of the silence, and Daniel does not answer because he does not know, not yet, but something in him feels like it should, like the answer is there if he could just reach it. They move forward maybe 20 feet, maybe 30. Distance becomes harder to measure in places like this where there are no windows, no markers, only the rhythm of footsteps and breath, and then Rex stops again, not abruptly but with intention, his head turning slightly toward a section of wall where a faint line of light seeps through, thin as a blade. Daniel steps beside him and places his hand against the surface, the concrete cool and slightly damp, and again that sensation returns, stronger this time, the smell of smoke sharper now, mixed with something metallic, something urgent. His pulse shifts, just a little, and his fingers trace along the edge until they find another seam, less hidden this time, as if meant to be found by someone who knows what to look for. Keller steps closer, watching carefully. You have done this before, he says quietly, not accusing, not surprised, just acknowledging what is becoming increasingly clear, and Daniel exhales slowly, his voice almost a whisper. I think I have, he says, and this time there is no hesitation, only uncertainty about the details, not the truth. He presses again, firmer now, and the section of wall gives way with a soft mechanical shift, revealing a wider space beyond, a room, not large but deliberate, the air inside still, untouched, as if sealed away from the world outside, and as they step in the light changes, warmer somehow, filtered through a small, high window that lets in just enough daylight to reveal what has been hidden here, a metal table, scarred and worn, a set of shelves along one wall holding boxes, old, labeled in faded marker, and on the far side, mounted carefully, almost reverently, a single object that draws Daniel's attention immediately, a photograph, framed, slightly crooked, and he does not need to be closer to feel it, the pull, the recognition. His steps slow, then stop, and Rex moves beside him, sitting quietly now, his gaze fixed on the same point, and Daniel approaches, each step heavier than the last, until he stands in front of the photograph and finally sees it clearly. Two men, younger, uniforms marked with dust and wear, standing side by side in front of a structure that looks damaged but still standing, one of them unmistakably Daniel himself, years ago, before everything fell apart, and beside him a man he does not fully remember but cannot deny, because the recognition hits not in his mind but in his chest, immediate and undeniable, Howard Langford, and between them, barely visible but there, a dog, smaller than, ears too large for his head, eyes already sharp, already watching, Rex. Daniel's breath catches, not from shock but from something deeper, something like truth finally surfacing after years beneath the weight. Keller steps up beside him, silent for a moment, then speaks softly. He knew you, he says, and Daniel nods slowly. Eyes still on the photograph. No, he replies, voice steady now, grounded in something that feels real for the first time in a long while. He did not just know me. Daniel pauses, his hand lifting slightly, not touching the glass but close enough to feel its presence. He trusted me, and behind them, beyond the hidden walls and sealed passage, the world continues to move, unaware, but here, in this quiet room, the past has finally stopped running, and the truth is no longer hiding, it is waiting to be understood. Daniel does not move for a long moment, not because he cannot but because something inside him has finally stopped running, the photograph holding him in place like a truth too heavy to pass by, and Rex remains seated at his side, quiet, steady, his presence anchoring the moment as if he understands that this is not just memory returning, it is something being restored, piece by piece. There is more, Keller says softly behind him, his voice careful not to break whatever has settled in the room, and Daniel exhales slowly, his gaze shifting from the photograph to the shelves along the wall, the boxes lined up with a kind of deliberate order that does not belong to chaos. This was not a place abandoned, it was a place preserved. He steps toward them, each movement measured now, intentional, and Rex rises with him, following close, his eyes scanning not for threat but for meaning. Daniel reaches for the nearest box. The cardboard worn but intact, a faded label barely readable. He brushes the dust away with the back of his hand and leans closer, the letters forming slowly, like something remembered rather than read. Field logs, he murmurs, and something in his chest tightens again. Not pain, not fear, something else, recognition layered with weight. Keller steps closer, watching as Daniel opens the box, the lid lifting with a soft rasp, and inside, neatly stacked, are folders, each one marked with dates, locations, details that feel too precise to be forgotten and yet somehow were. Daniel takes one, his fingers hesitating for just a second before opening it, the paper inside slightly yellowed but intact, and as his eyes move across the line something shifts, not all at once but in fragments, like light breaking through clouds, coordinates, supply routes, names, and then one line that stops him, written in a hand that is not his but familiar enough to matter, transferred civilian subject to safe corridor under Hayes' supervision. Daniel inhales sharply, the memory not fully formed but pressing closer now. Keller leans in slightly, reading over his shoulder, civilian subject, he repeats quietly, Langford. Daniel says before Keller can finish, the name no longer distant, no longer abstract, it fits now, like a missing piece finally found. Rex steps forward again, his nose brushing lightly against Daniel's arm, a small gesture, grounding, reminding, and Daniel flips to another page, then another, each one pulling more of the past into focus, not as a clear picture but as a series of moments, heat, urgency, movement, a structure compromised, a decision made in seconds that would last for years, and then he sees it, a photograph clipped to the inside of one folder, different from the one on the wall. Closer, more immediate, Daniel crouched beside a man on the ground, not injured in any visible way but overwhelmed, disoriented, Daniel's hand on his shoulder, steady, guiding, and Rex, younger, positioned between them and something unseen, alert, protective. The moment frozen but alive in its intention. You got him out, Keller says quietly, not as a question but as a realization, and Daniel nods slowly, his voice low but certain now. Not just him, he replies, closing the folder carefully, almost reverently. There were others. He looks around the room again, seeing it differently now, not as a hidden space but as a record, a place where something important was kept safe when the rest of the world moved on. This was never about money, Keller says, more to himself than to Daniel, and Daniel shakes his head slightly, his eyes returning to the photograph on the wall. No, he agrees, it was about making sure it was not forgotten. Rex moves toward the far side of the room again, his attention drawn to a lower shelf this time, and Daniel follows, crouching as Rex noses gently at a smaller box, one without a label, one that does not match the others. Daniel reaches for it, slower now, aware that whatever comes next matters, and as he lifts the lid he finds a single object inside, wrapped carefully in cloth. He unfolds it with steady hands, revealing a metal tag, not military, not standard, something custom, engraved. And he turns it slightly to catch the light, reading the words that have waited here. In silence, for the man who did not leave, Daniel's breath leaves him in a quiet exhale, not surprise, not shock, just understanding, and for the first time since this began, he does not feel chased, he feels found. Daniel holds the metal tag in his palm longer than he realizes, the weight of it small but undeniable, like something that was never meant to be lost, and Rex sits beside him, quiet, watchful, his eyes moving not between objects but between moments, as if he understands that this is where everything begins to make sense. Keller steps closer, his usual composure softened by something quieter now, something closer to respect. This was not an inheritance, he says, his voice low in the stillness of the room. It was a message, and Daniel nods slowly, turning the tag slightly between his fingers, the engraved words catching the faint light from the high window, for the man who did not leave, and something in his chest settles, not fully, not completely, but enough to feel like ground beneath his feet again. He rises slowly, slipping the tag into his jacket pocket next to the old dog tags he has carried all these years, metal against metal, past and present finally touching, and Rex stands with him, his posture shifting again, alert but calm, as if the direction has changed, not danger now but purpose, the condition in the will. Daniel says, turning to Keller, his voice clearer now, steadier. It is not about a location. Keller watches him closely, understanding forming before the words are finished. It is about this. Daniel gestures lightly to the room, the shelves, the files, the photograph, proof. Keller nods once, slow, deliberate, proof of what happened, he says, and Daniel exhales, a quiet release, proof that it mattered, and for a moment the room feels different, not hidden anymore but revealed, like something that has waited long enough and is finally being seen. Rex moves toward the door again, not the hidden panel they entered through but the opposite side of the room, where another exit waits, less concealed, more direct, and Daniel follows, understanding without needing to question. Keller lingers for just a second, his gaze sweeping the room one last time, committing it to memory, then turns and joins them, because whatever this place holds is no longer meant to stay buried. As they step into the next corridor, the air shifts, fresher, cooler, carrying the faint sound of the city again, distant but present, and Daniel feels it, the difference, the transition from past to present, from hidden to seen. They move quickly now, not rushed but purposeful, and when they reach the final door it opens easily, no resistance, no lock, just a simple push into daylight. The alley on the other side brighter now, the morning fully awake, and for a moment everything seems almost normal, almost ordinary, until Daniel notices the car, not across the street this time but closer, parked just beyond the alley entrance, its presence no longer subtle, no longer hiding, and two figures standing beside it, not approaching, not speaking, just waiting. Keller exhales quietly beside him. They know, he says, and Daniel nods, not surprised, not afraid, just certain, because whatever they were trying to protect has already been found, already been seen, and there is no taking that back. Rex steps forward slightly, placing himself between Daniel and the street once more, his stance calm but firm, the same silent line drawn again, and Daniel rests a hand briefly on the dog's shoulder, a small gesture, grounding, grateful. It is all right, he says quietly, not to the men outside but to Rex, to himself, to the moment, because this time they are not running. Keller adjusts his coat slightly, his posture shifting from observer to participant. What happens now? He asks. And Daniel looks out toward the street. Toward the men, toward whatever comes next, and for the first time since this began, his answer does not come from uncertainty, it comes from clarity. Now, Daniel says, his voice steady, carrying something that was missing before, we tell the truth, and Rex does not move, does not need to, because the path is no longer hidden, it is right in front of them, and this time, they are walking straight into it. Daniel does not rush forward, not because he is afraid but because for the first time in a long while he understands that this moment does not need speed, it needs truth, and truth has a way of standing its ground without force. He steps out of the alley into the open light with Rex beside him, the city fully awake now, cars passing, people moving, unaware that something quiet but significant is unfolding just a few feet away. The two men by the car straighten slightly as Daniel approaches. Their posture controlled, professional, but not aggressive, not anymore, because whatever leverage they believed they had has already slipped through their hands. Keller walks just behind Daniel, no longer guiding, no longer leading, simply present, a witness now rather than a messenger, and Daniel stops a few feet from the men, close enough to be heard without raising his voice, close enough for Rex to step forward and stand at his side, calm, steady, his amber eyes fixed not with warning but with certainty. One of the men speaks first, his tone measured. Mr. Hayes, he says, as if the name carries weight now that it did not before, we would like to discuss the estate, and Daniel studies him for a moment, not judging, not angry, just seeing clearly. It is not an estate, Daniel replies quietly, his voice even, grounded. It is a record. The men exchange a brief glance, subtle but telling, and Keller steps slightly to the side, reaching into his coat. Not hurried, not dramatic, simply prepared. He removes a folder, one of the files from the room, and holds it up just enough for the men to recognize what it is, what it represents. Everything is documented, Keller says calmly. Dates, locations, witness statements, preserved and verified. The air shifts then, not with tension but with realization, because there is no argument against something that has already been proven, no strategy against a truth that has already been uncovered. Daniel reaches into his jacket and pulls out the metal tag, holding it for a moment before closing his hand around it again, not as a display but as a reminder, and he looks at the men, really looks at them. Not as obstacles but as part of something larger that has finally come into the light. He did not leave it to me so I could take something, Daniel says, his voice steady, carrying a quiet weight that does not need volume. He left it so no one could erase it, and for a moment no one speaks, the sounds of the city filling the space between them, a car passing, a distant horn, the ordinary world continuing without pause, and then one of the men nods slightly, not in agreement but in acceptance, a shift that is small but real. Understood, he says. And there is no threat in his voice now, no edge, just acknowledgement, because the situation has changed in a way that cannot be undone. Daniel exhales slowly, the tension he did not realize he was carrying easing just enough to feel like air again, and Rex relaxes slightly beside him, not lowering his guard but no longer needing to hold it so tightly. Keller steps forward then, professional once more but different now, aligned rather than separate. We will proceed with the legal transfer, he says, under the original conditions, and the men nod. Again, stepping back toward the car, not defeated, not resentful, simply done, because there is nothing left to contest, nothing left to take. As the car door closes and the engine starts, the sound fades quickly into the flow of traffic, becoming just another part of the city, and Daniel stands there for a moment longer, watching until it is gone, until the presence that followed him is no longer there, and then he looks down at Rex, his hand resting briefly on the dog's neck, fingers pressing into the thick fur, grounding, grateful. You knew, Daniel says quietly, not expecting an answer, and Rex looks up at him, eyes steady, calm. The same look he has always given, the kind that does not explain. Does not need to. They stand there in the morning light, two figures that most people would still pass without noticing, and yet something has changed, not in how they appear but in what they carry, the truth no longer hidden, no longer waiting, just present. And Daniel turns, not back toward the overpass, not back toward where he started, but forward, into the city, into whatever comes next, and Rex moves with him, not leading this time, not pulling, just walking beside him, equal, steady, as if the path no longer needs to be found because it has already been chosen, and somewhere in the quiet space between footsteps and breath, something settles into place, not victory, not triumph, something quieter, something lasting, the kind of ending that does not feel like an end at all, but a beginning that finally knows where it stands.